US President Donald Trump has urged Russian President Vladimir Putin to stop attacks on Ukraine after a series of overnight strikes on Kyiv killed at least 12 people and injured dozens. It was one of the deadliest attacks on the city since the start of the war. In a social media post, Mr. Trump said, "Vladimir, stop," after recently pressurising both sides to enter a ceasefire deal.
Kyiv, during the early hours this morning, came under a barrage of Russian missile and drone attacks. At least 12 people were killed and more than 70 wounded at 13 locations across the capital. No military targets in this western suburb, just blocks of flats.
There was an air raid siren. We didn't even have time to dress and to go out of the apartment. One blast came after the other. All windows were blown out, doors, walls. My husband and son were thrown to the other side.
Russia's Ministry of Defence said it carried out attacks on Ukrainian military sites. Reacting on his Truth Social platform, US President Donald Trump criticised Russia's actions, calling on Vladimir Putin to stop and get the peace deal done. And speaking in Madagascar, French President Emmanuel Macron gave an impassioned reaction to the attacks, saying Vladimir Putin needed to stop lying and that Ukrainians cannot be expected to accept a ceasefire whilst their capital is being bombed. While Ukrainian President Vladimir Zelensky, speaking during a visit to South Africa, said he didn't see strong pressure or new sanctions being placed on Russia. It sounded like a call for the US to punish Moscow's actions with fresh sanctions. Russia's foreign ministry today accused Ukraine of attempting to torpedo a peaceful settlement, without referencing attacks by its own forces on civilian districts in Kyiv. And in a week that the US set as a deadline for a ceasefire deal, Russia's actions this morning look more like an effort to derail it. Liam Nolan, RT News.
We're joined now from Kyiv by journalist Vladimir Solihub. Good evening, Vladimir. Thanks for joining us. The worst attack on Kyiv for many months. How are people there reacting?
Yes, David, this has been a terrible attack. People across the capital, which is home to almost 4 million people, were hiding in the shelters, in the subway stations, wherever they could, after hearing the air raid alarms and loud blasts that reverberated across the nighttime in the city here in Kyiv. According to Ukrainian military, Russia sent 250 missiles and drones on the capital last night, and among them 11 were ballistic missiles. People are frightened. People are wary, David, of this war that has been lasting for more than 3 years, and they want peace, but obviously they want a just peace. They don't want a deal that is being forced upon Ukraine right now. They really want these guarantees to be in place.
And Vladimir, we heard there President Trump appealing to Vladimir Putin to stop what he's doing. Is there any confidence there in Ukraine that he will actually listen?
Absolutely not, David. Ukrainians have been at war with Russia and Putin since 2014. There have been peace deals. There have been ceasefires, multiple ceasefires that were constantly violated by Russia and Russian military. And now, since 2022, the beginning of the full-scale invasion, again and again, Russia is violating its promises. Russia is not keeping its word. And just recently, the so-called Easter ceasefire, which was supposed to last for 24 hours, did not last even a minute.
OK, journalist Vladimir Solihub in Kyiv. Thanks for joining us on 6-1. We're turning now to the US peace plan for Ukraine, which proposes recognising Russian control of Ukrainian territory. I've been speaking to Owen Matthews, associate editor of The Spectator and former Moscow bureau chief for Newsweek. I first asked him why the plan is a non-starter for Vladimir Zelensky.
Well, here's the thing. I'm one of the people who thinks that, fair or not fair, ending the war is an absolute priority, not just on a humanitarian basis, but actually on the basis of saving Ukraine's nationhood and, escaping, with some kind of economy, with some kind of society intact. And I think the longer this war goes, the worse it will be for Ukraine. But that said, I think whatever compromises Zelensky might make, there is a limit to them. And the limit lies between recognizing legal title to the lost territories. Russia started with Crimea, and finding some kind of formula which recognizes them as lost, but without doing it legally. The one thing that Zelensky cannot absolutely, it's not for constitutional reasons, not for political reasons, agree to, is to legally admit that Crimea is now a part of Russia. That is the one thing he can't do. He can, acknowledge that it's gone. He can kick the can down the road, as was already agreed in talks in Istanbul back in March of 2022. They agreed to discuss the status of Crimea in 15 years, kick the can down the road. All that stuff he can do. The one thing he can't do is formally preside over the dismemberment of his own country.
Your own book about the Russian invasion of Ukraine is called Overreach. Is Putin in danger again of overreaching?
Yeah, I think that's you touch it with a needle, David, because the issue is that Putin lives in an information bubble. What we as what observers on the ground see as a great moment to take a deal. In other words, at the moment when the Trump White House has, for inexplicable reasons, decided that they want to create a deal, they want to pressure the Ukrainians into making a deal. They want essentially a deal at almost any cost. Putin has taken that fantastic windfall from the gods and pushed it and pushed it and pushed it and into territory where it just won't work anymore. So all of this overreach, in other words, the latest thing that we were talking about a moment ago, which was the demand that the United States and Ukraine recognize Russian sovereignty over Crimea, that's clearly impossible. That's just not realistic. It's Putin's massive overreach and his lack of connection to reality that's going to be the biggest danger, and it's going to derail the talks.
You described the American position as inexplicable. Could I ask you to try and explain it nonetheless?
America really doesn't really have a dog in this race. What's different about Trump is that he has promised, with his characteristic sort of immodesty, that he will bring this war to a swift end. Originally he said 24 hours. Now he's given himself 100 days. But the point is that he has admitted himself that it's actually much more difficult than he thought. He thought he could just sort of charge in and shut it all down, and everyone would just sort of say, brilliant, Dolan, you're great at doing deals. But the one thing that Trump has not done, which really could swing this war, is use America's economic might, for instance, to impose what are called secondary sanctions on countries that buy Russian oil and gas. Now, if Russia is unable to sell its oil and gas to China and India, then its entire war economy is just cut off at the knees. It's game over for Russia. That's economic collapse for Vladimir Putin. I think the problem is that Trump has been just negotiating through demands without actually compelling Russia to do anything. And there is only really one way to make Putin do something do something that he doesn't want to do, and that's to compel him to do it. There's basically no way just to talk him into doing it.
Owen Matthews, Associate Editor of The Spectator, thanks for joining us on 6-1.
My pleasure.